Hands up now. Stop resisting. Get down. Keep moving. Eyes forward.
In 2012, the DEA wasn't hunting an ordinary drug trafficker. Their target was a mysterious programming genius who had built a criminal empire spanning the globe. He made hundreds of millions of dollars, ordered murders from afar, and hid behind layers of encryption and dozens of shell companies. But to catch him, the DEA had to set an elaborate trap in Liberia. Before the name Paul Roux appeared in DEA files and became associated with one of the most dangerous technology crime bosses of the 21st century, he was simply a boy with an unusual passion for computers. Paul Roux was born on December 24, 1972, in Bulawayo, Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. He was adopted as a child and grew up in Zimbabwe before his family moved to South Africa. Unlike many children his age, Paul had little interest in sports or outdoor activities. What fascinated him were computers and understanding how they worked. People who knew Paul in his younger years noticed his remarkable ability to focus. Once something captured his attention, he could spend hours, even days, studying it until he understood every detail. He preferred teaching himself rather than attending school. In Paul's mind, textbooks could never keep up with his curiosity. Growing up in South Africa, Paul spent most of his time reading technical manuals and teaching himself programming. He quickly realized that computers were more than just a hobby. They were something he understood better than anything else. While many people were searching for stable jobs, Paul was thinking about systems, lines of code, and ways to build increasingly complex programs. That ability made Paul feel different. He disliked crowds, hated being controlled, and had no desire to live an ordinary life. At that time, there was only one goal in his mind, Theo: become the very best at whatever field he chose to pursue. And no one around him could have imagined that the passion for computers possessed by that boy born in 1972 would, many years later, become the foundation of an empire stretching across the globe and lead to consequences so serious that the United States government would mobilize multiple agencies to hunt him down. But before all of that happened, what did Paul Roux do to turn his programming talent into something that would capture the attention of the entire world? As Paul Roux entered adulthood, he began to realize that his programming talent could open doors that very few people could even see. While many programmers of his era worked for software companies or developed ordinary applications, Paul became fascinated by a different field: security. He believed that in an age when the internet was expanding rapidly, privacy would become incredibly important. And if information could be stolen, then there had to be a way to protect it. During the late 1990s, Paul lived and worked in several countries, including the United Kingdom, Australia, the Netherlands, and Hong Kong. Constantly moving from one place to another never bothered him. What mattered far more to Paul were the computers and the lines of code appearing on his screen every day. Then he began developing encryption for the masses, or E4M, a disk encryption program designed to help users protect their personal data from outside intrusion. Within the security community at the time, it was considered a remarkable project. E4M quickly gained recognition, and many experts praised the technical abilities of the man behind it. What excited Paul was not fame. He enjoyed the feeling of creating something that others could not easily break. The deeper he went into his research, the more he realized one thing: every system has weaknesses. And if someone is smart enough to build those systems, that same person can also find ways to bypass them. That idea began to occupy more and more of Paul's mind at that time. He was still a gifted programmer respected by the technology community. No one knew that the man creating tools to protect data would, just a few years later, use those same abilities to build something far bigger. An empire that would bring money flowing in from all over the world. As the internet began to explode in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Paul Roux saw an opportunity that very few people noticed. While most companies were trying to figure out how to make money from the internet, Paul was thinking much further ahead. He realized that geographical distance had almost disappeared. A person sitting in Asia could sell products to customers in the United States without ever meeting them face to face. With that idea in mind, Paul began building online businesses. At first, everything looked like ordinary companies. But he soon discovered a market that offered enormous profits: prescription drugs. In the United States, many medications could only be sold with a doctor's prescription. But on the internet, regulation was not always strict. Paul saw that loophole and began building an online pharmaceutical operation aimed at American customers. Money started flowing in faster than he had imagined. No storefront, no direct contact with customers, no need to appear in public. Everything was run through computers. What fascinated Paul was not just the growing amount of money. He realized that he could operate an entire business from behind a screen. And the more money he made, the more convinced he became that he was on the right path at Takedown. People around him, he was simply a successful internet entrepreneur. But in Paul's mind, this was only the beginning. He began studying how to expand the system, studying how to hide the flow of money, studying how to build companies without anyone knowing who was truly behind them. Paul had no idea that the decisions he made during this period would transform him from a talented programmer into the leader of a network stretching across multiple countries. And as the money kept growing, so did his ambitions. The money generated from his online businesses made Paul Roux realize that he was no longer just a programmer working alone. The system he had created was growing too quickly and required a much larger structure to operate. Paul began establishing numerous companies in different countries. On paper, they all appeared to be legitimate businesses. Some handled payments, others managed shipping, while certain offices were responsible for customer service. To the people working inside them, everything looked completely normal, but no one could see the entire picture. Paul had intentionally designed the system that way. Each employee knew only his or her own task. Each company saw only a small part of the machine, and very few people knew who the real boss was. He controlled everything through emails, phone calls, and computers. In many cases, people working for Paul had never even met him. They only knew that somewhere out there was an incredibly intelligent man who controlled everything. Money continued pouring in at an astonishing pace. The more money he made, the more cautious Paul became. He used aliases. He changed residences constantly. He moved between Hong Kong and various other countries. At this point, only one thought occupied his mind. The people do not know who I am. They cannot stop me. That mindset gradually pushed him further away from a normal life. Paul disliked appearing in public. He did not trust other people. He preferred sitting in front of a computer screen rather than attending crowded social gatherings. However, the enormous wealth he controlled soon created a new temptation. Paul no longer wanted to stop at selling prescription drugs online. He began to see markets that promised even greater profits. And that was the moment when everything started to move in an entirely different direction. For many years, selling prescription drugs online brought Paul Roux enormous wealth. But the more money he made, the more he realized one thing: IT still wasn't enough. Paul no longer thought like a programmer or an internet entrepreneur. He began thinking like the man running an entire global network. In his mind, if he had already built a cross-border shipping system, payment networks, and layers of shell companies, then why not use them for other businesses that generated even greater profits? Step by step, Paul expanded his operations at IT first. They involved secret transactions. Then came gold trading. After that, precious timber. Next came drugs, and eventually weapons. Each new venture brought massive profits. His operations stretched from Hong Kong and the Philippines to Brazil and several countries in Africa. Money constantly flowed through different companies, making it almost impossible to trace. What made everything truly frightening was that very few people understood the full scale of the organization. Paul deliberately kept everyone in the dark. The person responsible for shipping would not know who handled the money. The person handling the money would not know what the shipments actually contained. Each link in the chain could see only a small part of the machine, and the only person who could see the entire picture was Paul Roux. Sitting in front of his computer screen, he monitored operations taking place across multiple countries. Millions of dollars appeared and disappeared through various accounts. Transactions were carried out every day. The people working under him simply followed orders and rarely dared to ask questions. By this point, Paul had become a true kingpin. But the higher he climbed, the more he understood that the world he had entered was far more dangerous than selling prescription drugs online. Because in that world, mistakes did not simply cost people money, they could cost lives. As his empire continued to expand, Paul Roux understood that the greatest danger he faced was not competition, but exposing himself. He disliked attention. He had no desire to become a famous name. The wealthier he became, the more he wanted to disappear from people's sight. Paul constantly changed his place of residence. Hong Kong, the Philippines, Brazil, and many other countries were simply temporary stops. He rarely stayed in one place for long. Even people who had worked for him for years did not know exactly where he was. Most orders were sent through emails, satellite phones, or separate communication channels. By this point, Paul's life was completely different from the days when he sat alone in front of a computer screen. He owned multiple properties, luxury cars, and was protected by armed men. But the more money he accumulated, the more he lost his sense of security. He began to distrust everyone. Slow response from employee irritated him. Even a minor mistake at work could trigger his anger. Anyone who lost his trust was immediately removed from the organization. Paul no longer viewed his subordinates as partners.
You're done. Get out of my sight and don't come back.
In his mind, they were merely replaceable links that could be discarded at any moment. He believed loyalty existed only when it was accompanied by fear. Gradually, paranoia became part of his daily life. He checked everything, monitored every dollar, and wanted to know exactly what was happening inside his network. No one was allowed to hide anything from him, but the greater his power became, the stronger his fear of losing everything grew. Paul began to fear betrayal. He feared law enforcement agencies. He feared people who knew too much. It was that fear that pushed him into an even darker chapter, where his orders no longer revolved solely around money. Growing paranoia completely changed Paul LaRue. The man who had once spent hours writing code and studying computers now devoted most of his time to controlling a network that stretched across multiple countries. In the world he had entered, money was not the only thing that determined power. Fear was what kept the machine running. Paul did not tolerate failure, nor did he forgive those he believed had betrayed him. The moment he felt that someone posed a threat to the organization, he would seek to eliminate that threat before it was too late. According to investigative records and testimony later presented in court, Paul ordered or participated in multiple murders. Those orders were often issued from afar. The people carrying them out frequently did not know the full reason. They only knew that their boss did not tolerate mistakes. What made it even more frightening was that Paul maintained his usual calm demeanor. He could spend the morning discussing a business deal worth millions of dollars, then casually switch to talking about getting rid of someone as if it were just another part of the job power had changed the way he viewed the world. In Paul's mind, loyalty had to be maintained through fear. He believed that if his subordinates feared him enough, they would never dare betray him. But that method of control also turned him into a prisoner of his own making. He trusted people less and less. He could not sleep peacefully. He constantly changed locations. He always prepared escape plans in case something went wrong. On the outside, Paul remained a wealthy businessman with an enormous fortune. But behind closed doors, he was living in a world filled with suspicion and pressure. Meanwhile, on the other side, American law enforcement agencies had begun noticing unusual money flows and operations stretching across multiple countries. And for the first time in many years, someone had started to catch a glimpse of the shadow of the empire that Paul LaRue had hidden so carefully. For years, Paul LaRue believed that the decentralized structure he had built was complex enough that no one could ever see the entire picture. Companies were scattered across different countries. Money constantly moved through multiple layers of intermediaries. The people working beneath him knew only small pieces of the system, but the larger the empire became, the more traces it left behind. In the United States, law enforcement agencies began noticing unusual transactions connected to online prescription drug sales. Separate investigations gradually started pointing toward a common link. Behind many seemingly unrelated companies, a massive network was operating from the shadows. The DEA began to take notice. At first, they only saw scattered pieces, the bank account, a suspicious shipment, an alias, a phone call from overseas. But the deeper the agents investigated, the more they realized they were not dealing with an ordinary criminal organization. They were following the trail of someone extraordinarily intelligent, someone who understood technology and constantly stayed one step ahead of his enemies. Meanwhile, Paul continued living his life. He moved between countries, handled multi-million-dollar deals, and believed that nobody could ever reach him. But on the other side, DEA agents had been patiently watching for years. They knew that one small mistake could ruin the entire operation, because if Paul discovered he was being watched, he could disappear within hours. For that reason, the investigators chose not to rush. They needed a trap big enough, a trap that would make Paul LaRue walk into it himself. And after years of waiting, that opportunity finally appeared in a West African nation called Liberia. After years of surveillance, the DEA understood that capturing Paul LaRue through conventional methods would almost certainly fail. He constantly changed locations, used multiple identities, and rarely appeared anywhere that made him easy to reach. The agents decided on a different approach. They would make Paul come to them voluntarily. The secret operation was carefully prepared. Through confidential informants and cooperating witnesses, the DEA created an attractive international business deal. Everything was designed to appeal to the one thing Paul cared about most: money and the opportunity to expand his power. After receiving the information, Paul became interested. In his mind, this was simply another major deal. He believed he was still controlling the game, just as he had done many times before. In 2012, Paul agreed to travel to Liberia. He had no idea that every step he took was already being monitored by American agents. As he made his way to the meeting, Paul maintained his usual calm demeanor. After years of operating successfully, he had become extremely confident in his own abilities. Previous investigations had never forced him to pay the price. That confidence convinced him that this time would be no different. But for the first time in decades, Paul had made a miscalculation. The moment the meeting began, DEA agents moved in. Everything happened quickly. The man who had once controlled a global criminal network had no time to react. There were no shell companies and no security team. No thousands of miles separating him from the people trying to catch him. Paul Roux was finally placed in handcuffs. That moment marked the end of many years spent living in the shadows. But for the DEA, it was only the beginning, because the man they had just arrested possessed countless secrets that could lead to numerous other criminal cases around the world. Paul Roux's arrest in 2012 brought an end to years of living in the shadows. But for American investigators, the most valuable prize was not simply putting an international kingpin in handcuffs. What they truly wanted were the secrets inside his mind. Paul quickly realized that the game was over. Unlike the cold and feared figure who had once intimidated his subordinates, he was now facing a series of charges that could keep him behind bars for the rest of his life. The man who had always believed he was one step ahead of everyone made a different decision: cooperation. Paul agreed to become a cooperating witness for the United States government. Over the following years, he provided information about the network he had built, identified former associates, and helped investigators unravel numerous international criminal cases. During legal proceedings, Paul admitted to participating in or ordering multiple murders. His testimony shocked even experienced investigators, revealing the true scale of the empire. He had once controlled one link after another was exposed. One secret after another came to light. Former members of his organization were arrested or brought before the courts. The massive money-making machine that had operated across several continents finally collapsed. What makes the story of Paul Roux so remarkable is not simply the amount of money involved or the global reach of his organization. He had once been a programming genius, the creator of encryption software respected by the cybersecurity community. A man who could have become a successful technology entrepreneur or a renowned security expert. But over time, ambition and greed pushed him down a different path. From lines of code on a computer screen, Paul built a criminal empire that stretched across the world. And in the end, that same empire brought him down. The story of Paul Roux became a powerful example of a new kind of criminal in the 21st century, a man blessed with extraordinary intelligence, but one who chose to use it in a way that ultimately destroyed everything.